Even though this is what the original planter box looks like, the only thing I burn in this video is the new one. My friend's wife approached me about replacing the old, decrepit planter boxes at the restaurant she manages. Cedar was too expensive, so I made some design choices to help ensure that fir construction-grade lumber would withstand the elements. The first part of my plan, as few screws as possible. I didn't want to give water an easy route into the wood. I designed the planter using mortise and tenon joinery. I set about measuring and breaking down some 2x4s first. These would be used for the stretchers on the side panels. To remove the rounded edges on the 2x4s, I ran the boards through the jointer and then the planer. I ripped them to final width on the table saw. Then I cut them to final length on the miter saw. I removed ½ an inch from all sides to create the tenon using the dado stack on the table saw. I ripped another 2x4 in half and cut it at 45 degrees for the top panels of the planter. Next, I chose some tongue and groove boards for the sides. These came in 8-foot lengths, which I broke down at the miter saw into more manageable pieces. There were a lot of pieces. I planed the boards down from 3/4 of an inch thick to just under 5/8 of an inch. This also helped reduce the weight of the final piece. On to the legs. I originally planned to use laminated 2x4s, but it turned out cheaper to just use 4x4s. I broke down and milled them flat just like the 2x4s earlier. After cutting them to their final size, I laid out the legs in the orientation I wanted so the best parts of the grain would be exposed, and marked it on the ends. To lay out the mortises, I marked one line at a time on each piece, making sure to keep the same measurement consistent between legs. I then adjusted the combination square to the next measurement, and repeated on each leg until the mortises were fully laid out. I first tried cutting the mortises on my drill press, but that didn't go so well, so I switched to making multiple passes with my router. Here's a tip. You can line up the edge of the bit with your markings to place the cuts very precisely. I squared off the rounded edges of these mortises with a chisel. Each stretcher and leg needs a channel for the tongue and groove boards to float in. For the stretchers, this was easy to cut on the table saw with a dado blade. For the legs, since the channel didn't run past the mortises, I had to make multiple passes with the router to get the width I needed. With everything cut to size and the joinery complete, it was time to sand. I used the orbital sander to chamfer the edges of the legs to avoid tear out. It took a long time to sand all the tongue and groove panels, and I did it late at night after a full work day. You could say I was relieved when it was finished. I test fit everything and glued it all up. I don't have much footage of this because the piece is so big and my shop is so small that none of the video I shot actually shows any work being done. I couldn't get a wide enough angle, something to work on for next time. Once the clamps were off, I transferred the measurements of the inside corners to the tongue and groove panels that would rest on the inner lip for the bottom. I cut these notches out on my bandsaw. And now, the fun part. A huge thank you to Johnny Builds for answering my questions regarding Shou Sugi. You should check out his tutorial on how to do this. I'll leave a link in the description. Let me tell you, taking a propane torch to an assembled project is a really weird feeling. This was by far the most fun part of the project, though. I cleaned off the soot with a wire brush and did a light sanding with 120 grit sandpaper to smooth everything out. After wiping everything down with a damp cloth and letting it dry, it was time for finish. I'm hoping that burning the wood imparts some weather resistance, but since I didn't use the traditional cedar or cypress, I don't expect it to last as long as real Shou Sugi. Instead of sealing with oil, I finished the planter with Minwax Helmsman spar urethane. I laid in the bottom panels and finished them as well. Before adding the liner, I pre-drilled holes for the top panels once I'd clamped them in place. I know, I said I wanted to avoid screws, but I couldn't figure out how else to attach these. Plus I figured that if they do get water damaged, then it would be easy to remove and replace them. I used 4mm plastic sheeting as a liner. Once it was in place, I screwed down the top panels and trimmed the excess liner. Finally, I cut and drilled some drainage holes in the bottom, and the planter was finally done. I love how the planter came out. The Shou Sugi technique makes wood look amazing, and the satin finish urethane came out very nice. I think that between the mostly screwless construction, burning the wood, the liner, and the spar urethane, the planter should last a decent amount of time. My friend's wife was thrilled too. Now I have to build 3 more for them. I hope you enjoyed watching me build this planter as much as I enjoyed building it. You can follow me on Instagram at dbbuilds to see what I'm up to next. Thanks again for watching.